You actually mentioned a phrase called tribals.
What you, sir, and I and our students unwittingly call the tribe were the original founding populations of the Indian population. And we have descended in toto from that population we call tribal at this point of time.
Tribal as a word, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, does not perhaps exist before the British came in and gave it a term called tribals. I would much rather substitute it for something which is more akin to our culture and substitute it as Janjatiya, Samu. Now, when you talk of Janjatiya Samu, can I then say that the Janjatiya Samu was a set of people who dwelt in the forests or who dwelt in the hills, as opposed to people who existed in the plains? And if you extend that logic, then can I say that the Aranyakas or anything which is adhyatmic, so to speak, which was created, was perhaps created in forest and hills, and then there were these Brahmanas who were created for the plains. So when you try and drive a wedge between the tribals and the non-tribals, then that kind of a fault line is also as deliberate and done as deliberately by the colonialists as has been the other part of the narrative which we've just talked about.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I don't drive a wedge between
You don't. I'm saying people do.
Well, the point is that it has become a term of convenience. Also, it's a socio-legal term in view of reservations and so on. Be that as it may, in fact, what obtains in our civilization through time, particularly at the cusp at which urbanism, we have been hunter-gatherers the world over for the longest span of time. If evolution started in Africa, human evolution, about 2.2 million years, that's about 22 lakh years. The first cities appear only after 10,000 BC. So for 99.9% of the time, the world over, everybody has been a hunter-gatherer. So in India. And stone tool industries match the world over, except at different chronological in various brackets that are differently paced. In Africa, it is usually the oldest any type of tool industry. But the point is that in India, the first colonization, if it begins at around 15 lakh years, moves from Africa through the Sinai Peninsula and then the southern Arabian regions into the Makran coast and then into northwest India, tool sites are much older than within India, in Pabbi and Rohri Hills and so on, and in Potwar Plateau and so on. So once they come into northwestern India, the central valleys and the southern coastal regions get populated at that point of time. The population in Andaman and Nicobar is created at that point of time and so on. So what you, sir, and I and our students unwittingly call the tribe were the original founding populations of the Indian population. And we have descended in toto from that population we call tribal at this point of time. But the bifurcation took place and there were marginal migrations from northeast corridors and northwest corridors, as most of the genetic samples that have focused on the problem indicate that it's only in the extremities of the country, like the northeast, in Andaman and Nicobar, and in the northwest, there are mixing of genetic properties with neighboring populations. But in mainland India, it is the same DNA signature right through, which has been called the Indian DNA. So, the term tribal has a socio-legal and, other types of significance. In historical process, it has a secure place as the founding population of the Indian population.
I get it. So, one more thing which actually is currently very relevant and is also quite worrying to me as a as a student of liberal sciences or liberal arts, whichever you choose to call it, is that our Gen Z, right, we see is getting away from the disciplines of liberal arts and liberal science, and they are getting into information technology, things related to artificial intelligence, pure sciences, business management, etc. Now, when I say this, what I mean to imply is that if you have been a student of liberal arts or liberal sciences, you have a different perspective towards things. You know, your perspective across time and space becomes a lot more scientific because you have studied history, you have studied the political science, you've studied sociology, you've studied philosophy, you've studied culture, you've studied music. What should one do? You know, apart from the fact that you've taught students history for such a long time,
Yes.
you have taught, you are part of an education system. What should one do to arouse their curiosity in this particular field?
Well, I can only suggest a solution as far as my own knowledge and experience takes me. And archaeologists have a very interesting, in fact, anthropologists and sociologists too have a academic term which is called fieldwork. So, the social sciences, broadly speaking, in which archaeology and ancient history figures, requires that our undergraduates actually visit villages and archaeological sites in the field, because in the age of the internet, we are increasingly getting away from the field situation very clearly. So, to produce a mind that is, in a sense, very rounded, I would think that taking our students for more and more fieldwork to expose them to actual village life or how monuments are located in the field.
Absolutely. I think you made a very important point, sir. That suppose if I have to expose our younger generation to the so-called world marvels of India, I'm sure what you meant was take them to Amravati, take them to Sanchi, take them to see what the Bharat sculpture is. Is that what you meant, sir?
Indeed, that's exactly right.
So that would, you know, when they see those things, they will build an emotional connect. And so we should make an effort at the university and at the level of the schools to organize far more local visits to these monuments or to these museums, etc. for people.
That's an excellent idea. Yes, that'd be very good.
Now, sir, you've been a student of ancient Indian history, taught ancient Indian history. Now, in your scheme of things, I would be quite interested to know, because I still am not very clear about the various periodization which you can make and take us till the ancient Indian history limit ends.
Right. So that's a very interesting question, and the answer is that usually universities follow a syllabus. Like we have just made a transition now to the new education policy 2020. So, things have changed, but the traditional teaching until recently used to be that we started in the first year of undergraduate by looking at the long prehistory, the 15 lakh year prehistory consisting of various evolving stone ages, and come up to the age of metals, at which time cities begin to appear, and urbanization also appears. They are called Bronze Age cities. So Harappa and Indus Valley cities are Bronze Age, and many things in the Ganga basin also are Bronze Age. And then the Iron Age comes, the state rises with the coming of in the post-Rigvedic period. And so, and then the first empire, the Mauryan Empire, takes place, and the ambit of urbanism expands overseas, say, for instance, to Gandhar and to Central Asia, which in a sense was already was in the shall we say in the radius of Indus Valley already, because the 4 volumes that Ashkoparpola has compiled of Indus Valley seals, there are Indus Valley seals up to southwestern Iran, and then in Tajikistan and Central Asian areas, and then in partly in Pakistan and rest in India. So, in a sense, the
In
spread
India,
of
India, how far does it spread towards the eastern side? I mean, if you take the same period together.
well, I would know that a number of people say that some of the bricks are found in the Ganges Valley as well. But certainly it spreads to Madhya Pradesh, it spreads to Maharashtra, and Saurat Harappan is there in Gujarat. So that is the extent until it declines in what's called the early Vedic period.
So after the Mauryan age, then you proceed further.
Yes, so once the Mauryan Empire is found, you can see the Bamia Buddha used to be there in Afghanistan, and the entire area, in a sense, through the common thread is the spread of Buddhism beginning 6th century BCE, because Mauryans had their own. We often talk about Guptas having their overseas trade relations and maritime, but actually the trading started much earlier, perhaps even before state formation, already trading. But of course, with the formation of the Mauryan state, corporate funding, if you please, of not only Buddhist establishment, but also maritime activity. Let's remind ourselves the Arthashastra was something that pertains to the Mauryan period, and how important economy is. And Ashokan inscriptions dot everything from the Ganges Valley through the Son Valley into Narmada Valley, into Nala Sopara, and then in Gir. So already Ashoka himself was exploring trade options on the Arabian Sea front.
So Bharatkisoch Foundation has one of its important pillars as economy. And when we talk of economy, what immediately comes to our mind is Arthashastra. It's a secular treatise. Apart from many other things, it also deals majorly with economy. Now, as a historian, give our viewers, and especially for Bharatkisoch, some analogies from our scriptural sources, including Arthashastra, about this pillar, an important pillar of Bharatkisoch Foundation, which is the economy.
Well, that's a very large question, and I would rather break it down.
Some interesting stories also, if you have.
Yeah, I would like to think that the proposition of an economy could be broken down in terms of 2 separate productive systems which are interconnected. We spoke about tribes who exist to the day. We speak of farming populations, and Ashoka actually traversed the central region all the way to Western India to actually be directly in touch and have a look at the forested as well as the nascent agricultural areas in what were formerly forest areas. So the economy should actually be broken down in terms of agrarian, which is in the countryside, and to reach which the Buddhist establishment encouraged by, for instance, Emperor Ashoka was extremely active. Any hill in central India, particularly Madhya Pradesh, has got a stupa on top of it. And every day new stupas are being discovered in Bengal and Bihar. I can take the Lal Pahadi stupa in Lakhisarai, for example. And also in Uttar Pradesh, in southern Uttar Pradesh, where you have Sarnath and you have Kaushambi, which are major Buddhist establishments, and Bodh Gaya. And as you go down the central middle Indian basin, which are the former Prakrit areas, you find all Ashokan inscriptions are in Prakrit. So in a very abstract sense, these are all economic moves that were being made by the Mauryan state to actually connect with the producer. We have found Mauryan stupas with polished stones deep in the forest and high in hills, right next to prehistoric painted shelters, almost as if around 2nd century BC AD, the Buddhist establishment was already interacting with forest dwellers, extracting whether it is symbolic capital or forest raw resources, which are obviously required for urbanization, like wood and stone and so on and so forth. So there are two economies, the agrarian, which is rural, and there is the urban economy. The entire composition of Dharmashastras, for instance, starts after the founding of the first cities, because they lay down rules for conducting oneself in society, as well as the Panch Mahapatak, identifying what the five cardinal sins are and what the prayaschits are, and also property issues and inheritance, and in which gender also plays a extremely important role, in which the rights of inheritance of women are also discussed and laid down. So civil sort of society and jurisprudence emerges after the beginning of cities as a means of organizing production in the city. A city cannot work without rules, much as the modern city. If we don't follow the red lights, there will be traffic chaos. Nobody will be able to, get to work in time. So that.
So what you essentially are saying is that between the governed and the people who governed, there was a natural, strong nexus. If it was the countryside, then there was one way of dealing with it. If it was the cities or urban centers, then there was another way of dealing with it. However, you connect all this during the Mauryan period with the spread of Buddhism. Now, my next leading question to you would be that, of course, if through the overland outreach within our country also, there was trade and there was a lot of economic activity, and there were ways to govern it by people who ruled. Then, do you think it was Buddhism which actually spurred this economic activity? And if you think that it was,
in the rural areas, yes. It was a means for the city to actually reach out and contact the forest dweller, if you please, or whatever, and to recruit their skills.
No,
but city production is a different matter. You see, if we consider just agriculture, it is a simple relation of the producer in the countryside and the consumer in the city. But city is the focus for craft production, for iron works, for copper works, for bead production, glass, and terracotta, tiles of various kind, bricks which are going to be used in the city itself. Bricks are not going to be used in the village. So city itself is a production center too, like even in the Harappan period. They are all founded in the Ganges Valley, for instance, along the rivers, and even in the south. Vijayanagar is next to Tungabhadra, for instance. So trade routes were extremely important, but unless cities are producing tradable goods, what's the point of having cities?
So you mean to say that in the countryside, there was another system of production, and in the cities, there was another system of production, and there was a natural system of dialectics, and there were ways and means to govern both in terms of interrelationship or individually too, countryside and the janpads or some such. But there is a way, or there's an approach which, to my mind, so it creates a dissonance somewhere in my mind, and that is that we tend to start talking about Buddhism a lot more during the times when the trade in India starts to develop in a big way from the Mauryan times and thereafter, during the Gupta times and things. And we talk of trade with Rome, we talk of trade with other areas of the world. But how different, in your view, is Buddhism or Jainism? Because these are two sects, heterodox sects.
Well, I think that they were...
Let me just allow me to complete it. My question. As a heterodox sect, how different were they from the original, religion or the way of life Sanatan Dharma, as we call it, of India. Because I get a feeling that it's more to say that no, they were two different religions and Sanatan Dharma was something entirely different.
Well, actually, as somebody who was born and brought up in Bihar, where both Buddha and Mahavir belong, and as a teacher of Central University, having taught both these two undergrad students, I think that they are entirely in common. The precepts of both religions are entirely in common. The languages they use, which is Prakrit, they don't even use Sanskrit. Jainism, and there's a whole corpus there. You are quite right in saying that there is a certain bias to university teaching, that it goes usually towards Buddhism. It comes easier, and but actually there's an enormously large corpus and extremely full of wisdom connected with Jainism, because it is based on Prakrit, which was the language of Middle India, and it precedes Sanskrit by far. But Prakrit also is a very mature language, and it has its own grammar. And the entire corpus of Jain you'll run into thousands, I think, manuscripts. Are fascinating world of how learning was organized in the ancient times. I don't think there's much difference. And yes, of course, Hinduism arises before that, so there's no dispute that it has precedence over both, and it must have influenced in some way the way the later religions grow. And thirdly, that religion is a way of organizing identity. And for what? For the production in whichever way. So I don't think it's of great consequence so long as we study all religions, even Ajivak sect. Ashoka's great marvel of architecture are the Barabar and Nagarjun caves, which are among the very first sculpted caves, rock-cut caves, so to speak, in India. And there's a whole huge chain after that with Karla and Bhaja and Kanheri, and all over the country they explored. But they were gifted to the Ajivaks. It was for Ajivak, not for Buddhists.
And Ajivak would mean what in common parlance?
Well, it was a religion again, and it was another group of people for good reason who were living in the forest near Gaya, in the countryside.